Nick asked me the other day if I had to start over, what I would do differently. And I really reflected on this question and thought about it. And so as I was coming up with things that I would do differently, I thought it would be a great opportunity to share with you. Whether you're just getting started in your yoga practice or you're just feeling kind of stuck and you're not sure where to go, maybe some of these things that I'm going to share with you can be helpful for you in your teaching journey. So if you want to hear about this list that I came up with that could hopefully help you, grab your cup of coffee or whatever you're sipping on, take a seat, and let's chat.
So I really like this question, and I've heard some other people that I follow do something similar. And that's really what sparked the idea was, I wonder if Kristen has anything that she would like to share and help people in the same way. So, there's always not risk, but you don't want to dwell on what you did or didn't do because you can't change it, right? But I think there is value in it because you can learn from it and hopefully make better choices in the future. And if you're in a coaching situation or like this, with a podcast, you can share that with other people and hopefully just speed up some things. Things might not take quite as long, and you can potentially avoid some hurdles and pitfalls that Kristen went through.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of value in it, actually. And I don't want to go back and say I wish I'd done this, from a place of regret, but I want to use what I learned to help other people. I heard one of my favorite podcasters, and I would consider a virtual mentor. She doesn't even know who I am, but she says, purpose isn't necessarily a thing you do, but it's something you do or who you are when you teach people to avoid or get through something you've been through. And I really like that because I've learned so much just by listening to other people's experience and hearing how they would do something different or faster or, how, whatever that is. And I think that that's going to be, kind of the purpose of this podcast episode is to help teachers not feel oh man, I should have done this or I should be doing this, none of that. But is there something that we can share with you from my experience as a yoga teacher that could help you either get out of that faster, fast forward it, or just avoid it altogether. And then we also go in cycles. I'm kind of at a new place in my business and in this part of what I do that I'm finding myself sitting with as I was writing these out. I feel like I'm telling myself these things again because we're constantly coming to those new beginnings as we get stronger and, evolve in our practice. So it's good to just rehear sometimes.
Again, we don't dwell on the past and wish we would have done things differently because what if you had done things differently and life didn't turn out the way that it has? Sometimes going through those things is what teaches us. So experience is a great teacher. It can be. I would say reflected experience is a great teacher because if you just go through something and don't reflect on it, what's the value? You might not have learned the lesson. So that's part of this process. I think just we're reflecting on some things and what are the lessons we can draw. So what's the first thing, if you had to start over, what would you say would be the most impactful thing?
Hands down, just on a logistical standpoint, I definitely would have had some sort of system for booking and processing payments, which I wasn't teaching a lot of classes at the time. So I felt I don't really need to pay a monthly subscription to someone to manage my books for me. But I think I would have grown a lot faster had I had some of that taken off. And for a while, I just did it by myself, on my own. And then just the processing of payments, that's something that 5-6 years later, I am still working to streamline, and I'm so close, you guys. I'm so close. But having payments come in, from PayPal and Cash App and Square and Venmo and cash and checks, having them come in from so many different places made me not want to do more business. It truly did because it was such a headache at tax time or just all the time. I very much just like working with my bank. Everything is a thing. And so I'm how can I minimize even just not going to the bank? Can I pay somebody to just go to the bank for me once a week? But honestly, I think that I would have grown faster if I would have dealt with that problem on the front end and just had a lot less headache. And that's just something that it's not really something you have to learn. I mean, you kind of have to learn the system, but it's not a new skill, it's not a new certification or anything like that. So it's an easy one. So I definitely, for those of you who are kind of in the weeds of, especially around tax time, you're pulling all these, just make the jump. pay the 30, 50. I'm now, so what I was talking about earlier is like, we kind of find ourselves in this cycle. I'm now at a place where I'm looking at doing like an app situation where the student downloads the app, they pick, because we have 5 teachers now. So it's not just me anymore. So, in a sense, Nick, back to your question, I am kind of at the beginning because we've had teachers before together in a different model, but where I'm at now, I've never been before. So I find myself asking myself, is this one of those I should have paid the 30 or $50 even when I wasn't really making a whole lot of money in the beginning? Because this is a beginning. So is this a time where I need to invest the extra money? It's going to be a solid like 150 extra dollars if I go this route, but will the ROI be worth it? And now so like you said, we don't want to dwell on the past, especially if there's any shame or like whatever associated with it. But we do want to learn from the past. Like you win or you learn, right? Like that's it. That's how we roll. And so, can I take the lesson that I learned 6 years ago as a new yoga teacher in a new town and apply it now and fast forward some of this for myself? I think absolutely. So that would be the first one that, and I mean, a little bit even about this from, the studio that we did together, that it's a pain in the butt. And sometimes the systems are worth it. And I think we found out like sometimes it's not. So you might have even a little bit to speak into that.
Yeah, and I think you hit an important point that you need to view this as an investment. This is not now tax-wise, this is an expense, but view it as an investment in your business because it will streamline things. It'll streamline, especially from your customer journey point of view, when someone new finds you. How do they get enrolled in your system? How do they get all the information they need? How do they sign a waiver? How do they get you their payment information? How can they schedule classes? How can they buy passes? Like all these things that without some kind of system, you're doing manually and it takes a lot of time. I know because in our studio, we did a lot of stuff manually at first and a lot of that fell on me and it was a pain in the rear. And when we first implemented a system, I wouldn't recommend MindBody because it's a mammoth of a system. It can do a lot, but it's like it was designed in 1994 and they just kind of kept bolting on, but never like fixed it for like the modern era. So
Maybe it's changed since then.
I
Maybe, or it's made for much larger scales than what we were doing. Like
it is. I mean, both of those things. I hope it has changed because it was. I'm a techie person, and it was a frustrating experience to
I
figure
remember.
out how to get it to work. Now it's very customizable, and maybe that's part of the problem is it can do so much. It's just pretty hard to fix it. So I would not recommend MindBody, especially if you have a smaller operations. It's really better for a larger studio. And I think there's apps that do what MindBody does and does it better and probably cheaper. But viewing this whole thing, whatever the system is, Acuity is another really good option. Investing in something will get you time back. And now you have more time to grow classes, to do the other things, or just to not work as much.
Yeah, well, and I think, as yoga teachers, some of the system things really can be overwhelming, myself included. And even when I look at some of the things that I would do differently, it's usually because of my system. Like because of the system that wasn't properly supporting me, but I didn't know what I didn't know, and so learned it and now I'm teaching it. I want other people to just fast forward through this. But learning, I did go with Acuity. There are so many more now, but Acuity just is what we know and we've learned and it's working for now. But I do feel a sense of like, we might need to take that next step when it's time. But recognizing that like what makes us good at what we do is the way we interact with people, the way that we're able to give ourselves to them freely and create an experience for these people from the street to the seat. Like that's what we are good at. That's why people come to our classes because of the way they feel when they leave. So how can we make these other things that feel heavy to us, which eventually will translate into everything else we're doing? How can we offload that to either a person or for me, it was a system. So when I looked at it, I was like, I could hire someone to do these things for me, or I can invest this money per month and just find a system, invest in myself to learn the system well enough to get it to work and offload that from myself. And it's just something I wish I had done a little bit earlier than I did.
Yeah. And just to wrap up this point, just investing in yourself is a theme in business and you can drastically decrease the time it takes to get to the next milestone, whatever that is. Investing in systems is a huge one, again, because it can save you so much time. and just free you up to make more money or to do more classes or whatever. Other things to invest in, I think we're gonna hit here in a moment, but definitely view your business as something to invest in, and you as something to invest in that just pays huge dividends. And I know it's scary sometimes. You're like, I don't want to commit to paying this much per month because I'm not making very much per month. I promise you, doing that that'll be one key factor in helping you earn more money.
Well, and I think that leads us right to our next point. One of the things I would do differently is increase my prices sooner. I think as a new yoga teacher in a new space, just trying to I'm just like, I'll teach to anybody. Anybody will let me teach them. I will teach them because I want the income, I want the experience. But I think that I probably would have increased my prices a little bit sooner. Not even like more drastically, but probably quicker than I did. I think that combined with the system would have just been like, and that's actually when I did increase my prices the first time was when I got a system because I wanted it to make sense. And guess who batted an eye? No one. They just like they paid the extra couple of dollars per class because it was worth it to them. The service was worth it to them. And for me, if I can get my systems to be better and I can all of those things and I'm getting paid more, like I am going to show up so much better for them. When the leader gets better, we all get better, right? And so that's the second thing that I would have done differently.
And I know increasing rates is a scary topic, and a lot of us, and it's all in our heads. It's all from this fear, this scarcity mindset. And we definitely need to do an episode. I mean, we had planned on doing an episode in the future on just this topic alone, this mindset around money. I know it can be scary, but like Kristen had said, people they'll pay it if you're creating a good experience and providing value, you're very likely undercharging for what you do, especially early on. Again, because it's so scary, you're like, I don't even know what to charge. One thing I would recommend is looking at other studios in the area. What are they charging? And then it doesn't have to be the same. It could be, you could tweak it if you need to, but fight that urge to be scared of charging more money. You just do it afraid.
Something that was a mind shift for me was so I'm in a small town. So I think, well, it's a small town. I should probably charge less, right? Because it's whatever. But it may have even been you, Nick, but someone said, but the closest yoga studio for them to drive is about 40 minutes away. And people were doing that before I got here. So you're actually offering them a convenience. So maybe at the time I was just kind of popping around to wherever I could teach until I found like a steady place to teach. And so like maybe the experience isn't there yet. Like you're saving them an hour and a half of drive time for a yoga class. And I was like, that was a shift for me. And so that was when I was creating or when I was increasing the first time. And I remember how scary it feels, even as a hairdresser, when one of my clients, I did her hair and she was like, your haircuts, like you should be charging way more than you are. And I was like, no, wait, like this is my income. Like I don't want to lose clients. And then she just kind of walked me through it. It was, I remember who it was. I remember what her hair looked like, everything, because it was such a pivotal moment for me. And I remember I increased my haircuts by, I think $5 or $10 and then all my color prices. So each person's service was probably $20 to $30 more. When you're seeing 15 to 20 people a week, that adds up. And I wasn't doing any more work. So did I lose a couple of clients? Yes. And that's okay. Like they went and saw someone that was less expensive and maybe that they even liked better. But just that one little shift in something that I was already doing. But what that did was that freed me up to work less. So that was when I started having more kids and I had like babies at home and babies in my belly. Like I was able to continue doing what I loved, decrease the amount of time I was there, and I was still making more money. But I just remember someone having that conversation with me and I was like, this is the scary, because it was the first time I've ever increased my prices myself. I think I was like 22 years old or something. Like I didn't know what I was doing. So applying that years later paid off as well. So that's one of the other things I would have done differently.
Yeah. And just practically speaking, let's just talk about like if you're limited in the number of people, a number of mats in wherever you teach. Let's say you can only fit 10 just to make numbers easy. You've got 10 people filling up this space. And if some of those are unwilling to pay the higher rate, they will leave. Let's say 3 people left. And now you've got 7 people, but you're charging more money. So you're probably making about the same amount of money. And now you've got 3 more spaces. What do you think is going to happen with those spaces?
They're going to get
Someone's going to
filled
fill
with.
them
Yeah.
at the new rate. And now you're going to be making even more money.
And again, we could We could do this all day. Like this one, we could really probably stay on for a long time. But I think there's also a part that needs to be addressed in us, like where we like, I don't even feel like people should be paying this much for me because like all the ways that you fumbled to get to where you are and like even fumbling still. And so I think there's something in us too that's like, I don't deserve this much money or like, so why would someone pay this much for this? So that's like a whole nother.
So we'll just wrap it up with saying what you do is valuable. What you do provides value to these people. And the way we say thank you for the value we've been provided is by giving money. And it's just like people just won't even think about it. Now, if you go from a $5 drop in to a $20 drop in, that's a different story. That's probably too big of a jump. But if
Yeah.
you go from $5 to $8, like people are like, it's $3. Like, I don't care. Or, whatever the numbers, if people aren't going to care. And the ones who do care, they can leave.
Yeah. Well, and I think you have to kind of thicken your own skin up. If you've not been around this space for a long time, like you really do have to say, like, it's not always, sometimes people leave because they don't like you. They don't like your class. They don't like your music, whatever. And like, you kind of just have to figure out how you're going to process through that. But sometimes people it's just not for them and that's okay. Or you're not for them and that's okay. So you will lose people, whether you increase prices or not.
Yeah. Or maybe they're going through a health thing, or maybe their husband lost their job. Like, you just can't take anything personally.
You have to remember, like, it's not about us. Like the work we do is not about us. So when you reframe it in that mind of like, I'm going to do the best I can and I'm going to serve these people the best way I can. But ultimately it's not about me. It's about why I'm doing this. And you need to know why that is.
Real quick, I just want to tell you about a resource that we have available for teachers just like you. And it's our free Facebook group that's just for teachers. So if you're not already in that, join the group. I'll put the link in the description. You can go click that. It'll take you right to it and join. And it's a place where you can ask questions and get encouragement and feedback. And it's almost like a free like group coaching program. So get over there. If you need help, that is the place to be. Now back to the show.
So the next thing that and we won't spend a lot of time here just because we actually just addressed this in one of our previous episodes, but I would definitely learn how to and start nurturing my email list right away. Like as soon as I got people's email, like I would have started that back then, because I think about where I'm at now, like organically, I think Nick, we're over 500 people that are on my email list and I've done zero things with it. like nothing. They don't receive any communications via email for me. I definitely leaned more into social media and that was kind of my platform, but I would go back and start nurturing that more than I did, even if it was just for yoga classes. So now it's just like, if you're on my email list, you just kind of get what I'm doing: retreats, my in-person classes, my online classes, podcasts, my favorite things. Like it's just a little bit more of like my like lifestyle. But even if I was just doing like, hey, we have a class this week or, whatever, again, I kind of muscled up around that. Like instead of getting the Acuity system and instead of doing email, like I leaned on apps like Remind, which are great. Like it's not bad. But when you do that and you try to solve all these problems with all these little things, it just creates more things for you to manage. And so if I could go back, I think I would definitely do that, because I think about if I'd started back then and I have now just organically have over 500 people on my email list, what would that look like now if I had really nurtured that? That's definitely for you guys that did listen to that episode and you're like, oh my gosh, this feels overwhelming. Do it overwhelmed. Like just do it. Like get started now, even if you've been teaching for years like I have. Do it now, because it really, really will pay off. And we say this every time we talk about emails, like you're listening to this podcast because Nick, did a great job building and nurturing our email list for Christians to Yoga. So this is evidence of that, you guys. So
I mean, even when we've had our studio, our in-person studio in Tulsa, I did that real quick off the bat. And I didn't track stats of like percentages, but we sold a lot of stuff through email, even though it was an in-person thing. CDY, Christians Yoga, it's all electronic and it's not local. The studio was local, but I still utilized email and would let people know, about stuff that's going on. It's just a great way to communicate with people. And if you missed that episode, it's episode 9. So go back and listen to that one for more info on that. But it's just a great way to communicate with your people. And when you start early, you're training all your people and all new people to pay attention to your emails. So it'll just be part of your ecosystem and introducing people to you and how you communicate right off the bat.
So the last thing that I would do differently or sooner or better is I would continue coaching. So at the time of my transition from the studio in Tulsa, which we've talked about in my story, to where I'm at now, I had a coach because I got here and I was like, literally, like, I don't know who I am. I don't know what to do. I don't know these people. They don't know me. They don't like me. Like all of these things. I had a coach for, I think it was about 6 months. I mean, and it wasn't even for business. Like it was just someone coaching me because I literally just felt like I felt like I lived in the shadows. And I can rewind and see how effective that was. So something I would do different in my yoga journey is continue coaching, especially in those seasons when I got stuck and especially like when I wasn't sure which direction to take. So I think it could have just fast forwarded getting to where I am now. I don't know. Like, you can't say with certainty, but I do think because of how effective it was for me in that time to have someone who was objective, someone who, he wasn't married to my stuff, like my things. He could just kind of pull back and say, but is this really important? Or what's really the problem? And he would just ask really direct questions. And I think in some ways I have layered people like this in my life, in my ongoing life. Like Nick asks really great questions, really hard questions sometimes, and helps me reframe things. And then even just in my outside of work life, I have people who will just ask the hard questions. So I think because that was so powerful for me, but I think on a business level, there are times throughout that I'm like, I could have used some more challenging or more clarity, like from someone who's not in the weeds or living my life right now. So I definitely would have continued or stay more engaged with coaching along the way because I recognize how powerful it was for me in that time.
Yeah, and there's several things coaching does. I mean, one, a good coach doesn't tell you what to do. They just ask really good questions and kind of just help you get clarity around what it is that you want. And obviously sometimes, they have tactical things too, but that's more if it's just that, that's more of like a consultant versus a coach. But having someone who won't let you play small is really important because if we're not accountable to anybody else, if your family's not relying on you for your income from this, if you don't have a business partner, if you don't have a coach, if there's not some form of accountability or like someone who will kind of hold your feet to the fire, you can just not do anything. You can stay small. You can decide like, oh, it's just too hard. I'm just not going to do it. But when you have that other person that you're going to have to talk to and they're going to ask like, hey, how'd that thing go? You're like, I didn't do it. Like just having just the idea that you're going to have to tell somebody that you didn't do what you said you were going to do. Sometimes that's enough to just nudge you off, just get you off the bench and get you back in the game. And I think all of us need that on any level, any form of business.
Like you said, asking questions that bring clarity. Like in some moments, it was like, what do you just need this month? Like, what do you need to pay the bills this month? Let's work backwards from there. But then, like, taking you out and saying, like, okay, but this time next year, what do you want to be true? Well, those are two different answers for me, right? So if you ask me, what do you want to be true this month? That's going to be different than what do I need? And so there were times whenever he would say, like, let's just get through this month and then we'll start looking at how to get around not having to be here again or be here often. And so just having someone help you bring clarity to your strategy, because I may have strategized and it may have been very ineffective or inefficient, right? Whereas like he's like, okay, that's important to you. I hear you. And let's look at what we need to work on right now so that we can get you to where your eyeballs are above water and you can then start to see things differently. And so it was definitely very powerful for me, but I wish that I had stayed more engaged in that.
The objectivity is really important because things that to you can seem so big actually aren't always that big. And I don't know if you journal or not, if you've ever read back to something that was a big deal and now you're like, I don't know why I was so worried about that thing. We all do that. And a coach that I have said this to me when I said something, some of what I do for other people in my video business, I find hard to do for myself. And he's like, that's true for everybody. It's like being in the bottle trying to read the label on the outside. You're in the bottle, you're just too close to see it. But for someone who is objective about it, who the results, like they're not really tied. Obviously, they want the best for you, but it's not their life. It's not their problem. They don't feel the emotions that we have tied to this thing. And it's just much easier for them just to have objectivity, whether it's in advice or more importantly, I think in the questions. And like you're saying. So much value in a coach. And if you don't always have a coach 100% of the time, I think periodically you should hire someone just in short seasons, even just to kind of help you nudge forward a little bit in your growth. And again, this is another area that it's an investment and it will pay huge dividends. It can be scary sometimes to pay a large sum of money, and it's worth it. One, you're much more motivated and likely, like, I want to get my money's worth. So I'm not going to sit on this. If they're going to ask me to do something, I'm going to do it. You're much more likely to do that when you've invested some money. And two, just in the perspective and in helping you get more clarity, like you will earn more money in your business. Like, unless you're just a horrible coach, but I don't think you'll hire a horrible coach. So view it as an investment that will pay huge dividends. And
Mhm.
it's stuff that you learn that will help you repeatedly over the years. I have coaches that I worked with like 3 or 4 years ago that I still have things that will pop into my head. Something they said, like, oh yeah, like, yeah, got to remember that. So
Mhm.
it's something that can help you for years to come. So Kristen, I know I'd asked you this question, what would you do differently? So are there things that you would do the same that you wouldn't want to do differently? Whether it's the timing of it, when you did it, or just how you did it, or what you did?
Yeah, so something that I think that I would just repeat is the slow and organic growth of my business. So I didn't just come out of the gate and go like, I want to open up a studio, and that's great. Like for people that's their lifestyle, that's great. But what I wanted was to teach yoga and be a mom and wife, right? Like I didn't want to be married to a brick and mortar place. Now, when my kids are gone, that may be a whole different story. Like I don't know what that season of life will hold, but I know that in that season, I am so thankful that I didn't build a building or jump into a 5-year contract with a building space, especially given how the last 5 years have gone. But not only in that, but like also like in bringing people on. I feel like I had a couple of years to kind of just find my footing as a teacher, find my voice as a teacher. And so when people started showing interest in wanting to learn to teach as well, it was very organic to bring them on, start developing them as leaders, as yoga teachers. And I'm thankful that I did it that way. Like, other than just saying, like, we're going to open up a studio and put out, like, hey, we're hiring and try to get, because you guys have to remember, like, at this time, like, I was pretty much the only yoga teacher here. So, like, hiring would have meant also training, which is fine if that's the model that I would have gone with. But I'm thankful I didn't. I'm thankful that I allowed it to kind of just evolve organically. And I allowed the demand to kind of nudge the next thing. So like, we need this. We need more classes, but I don't want to teach more classes. I don't want to teach more than, a handful of classes a week if I'm going to grow the business side of things. If I'm just going to teach yoga and it's just going to be me, like 5 to 8 classes like that, I can do that. But what I foresaw is empowering other leaders to reach this community in a way that I can't do by myself. That was more of what my vision was. And I can't do that when I'm in 8 to 10 classes a week and trying to figure out how to be a business owner and all of that. So I'm grateful for where I'm at now. And I think that just allowing God to do what God does and just saying yes in those moments of like, I don't really know what I'm doing, but we're just going to try it anyways. One yes and one step at a time. I'm grateful that I took those baby steps instead of like skydiving.
Yeah, and it's not impossible to start from zero and go to studio. It's just not recommended unless you've done it before. I mean, that's different. But if you're new to teaching, you're new to yoga, if you're new to business, going from I have no students to I'm going to start a studio, I think is a horrible mistake. And we've had people in our past that we've worked with, or people just that I know through CDY and what we do, who they're like, yeah, I'm so excited. I just signed a lease. And I'm like, you don't even have students yet, and you just signed a like usually when you sign a commercial lease, it's not a 1-year thing. It's like 3 it's usually a multi-year thing. Sometimes you might find someone who's like, "Yeah, whatever." But typically commercial leases are 3 to 5 years, sometimes longer.
Mhm.
And if you don't have this track record and this experience, that to me, that's a huge mistake because if it doesn't go well, you are on the hook for paying that rent for all of those years, and you will not get out of that. Like, it's unless
Yeah.
you I mean, you might have to declare bankruptcy like that. It's ridiculous what you would have to do to get out of that. So be really cautious of that. So I do not recommend going from 0 to studio. So it's much better to just start building your audience and just rent from places. I don't know if people just don't know that this is an option. Maybe that's it. They're like, I don't know where to teach. It's like it's either I have my own studio or I don't. I'm like, no, there's all these areas in between that of renting space from other people, even by the class. Some places might just charge you a monthly rent, but even when we started renting space by the hour, like by the class. And that's a much safer way. You know, if a dance studio, a karate studio, just any place that has space that isn't being utilized during a certain time, that's more money than they had before. And so a lot of places are willing to just let you pay by the class. And that's a really excellent way to get started and to grow.
Yes, it is. Then that's what I currently do right now. And it's working still. So that's what we'll continue to do. The next thing that I am glad that I did, and if you guys didn't listen to my episode on series and really just my story, it really changed the trajectory of my business and kind of was like a pivotal moment for me to am I going to keep teaching yoga or not? Series was a huge thing. And so I'm so glad that I started teaching series, but even now, like where I'm at, I'm glad that I started teaching them when I did because by the time I started bringing on team members, it was very clear that this is the model that I wanted to run was essentially like teachers will come in as contractors. They'll teach the series they want. And then we have perimeters around them with like certain days, times, types, qualifications, minimums, things like that. But it's like they now get to come in, teach what they love, and they can make as much money as they want because they can pick the prices, they can decide how many people they want, and they all of those things. And to me, as someone who enjoys doing this work, if I were going to go work for somebody else or work for a studio, that makes sense because then I get to pick. I have more control of what I'm doing. I get to make more money. So these girls aren't just making, drop-in fees. They're making a good amount of money when they're doing the work to get people in there. And so that was what I foresaw, which is a very unique model. So if I hadn't started teaching series and learning really the ins and outs of what that looked like for me, I wouldn't be able to teach these girls to do the same thing. And so, and just run an entire studio on this model. So that was something that I was glad that I did start doing pretty much right away. Like when I think I've told you guys that when I was in training to get certified for yoga, I had like 6 weeks left and I just was like, does anybody want to come do yoga with me for the next 6 weeks? I need someone to practice on. And we had a ton of people show up. So kind of like inadvertently, that's where I started. But then like I didn't do much with it after that until we got into the studio. But now it's like the way I run the studio. And I'm glad because I think it all goes back to that's something I would do again.
If you missed the episode before this, episode 10, go watch that one where Kristen just went through series. And I think it was the eight reasons why
Mhm.
you should do a series or how a series can transform your business. So that one's a really good one.
The last thing that I would definitely do again, and this is the only one that made the list twice, is I would 100% pay the money I didn't have to hire the coach I didn't know I needed in the very beginning. Because again, Kyle, if you're listening to this at any point, shout out, homie. I would definitely go back and pay that money that I didn't have for the coach I didn't need because I look at the ways that he helped me set some things in front of me. And not only that, but like he challenged me to grow as a leader. So it wasn't just like, how are we going to get money in? How are we going to get people in your classes? It was the development of me as a person. So I would 100% go back and continue or I would go back and do coaching again because it changed me as a person and as a leader and the ways that I developed through all of that. And Yeah, so that's the one that I think I would put on my list twice because it was so impactful to me, and I think it's probably a lot of why I am passionate about what we do here.
Well, friend, I hope you enjoyed that episode. And if you did, hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you'll get all of our future videos and episodes. And if someone came to mind who you think could benefit from this, would you share it with them? That really helps us spread the message and grow the show, because we don't run ads or do anything else to really grow it. It's just you telling more of your friends and people who need to hear this information. So thank you for doing that. Now, if you haven't seen those other episodes we mentioned, you can click here to see the series one and this one to see the email one. So check out one of those if you haven't seen them, and we'll see you in the next one.